It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre. Welcome, everyone. I'm Tara. I'm a relationship and awesomeness coach.
Yes, you are. And I'm Andre. I am a sex-positive psychotherapist.
So today's topic is how to transition into different ways of doing non-monogamy while maintaining security in your relationship.
Part one.
Yeah, we're going to try to keep it tight today.
I like it tight.
I knew you would say that.
You set it up and I can't resist.
I'm curious if anyone who is watching right now has or is in the process of transitioning from one form of non-monogamy to another.
What do you mean by forms of non-monogamy? What would be an example of that for our listeners?
So if you maybe started off as a we're going to get into that, monogamous, and you're maybe moving into something like polyamory where you're dating other people, that sort of thing.
Right, okay.
So we had a really fun weekend.
Yeah, we sure did, huh?
We sure did.
On a few levels. What were you thinking of specifically?
Well, we were asked to be special guests as part of sex school at Oasis Aqua Lounge, which is an amazing sex-positive lifestyle sex club space in Toronto here.
Downtown Toronto. In a beautiful old Victorian house, right? And they have a hot tub and swimming pool. There's a dance floor. There's like a whole bunch of the dungeon. A lot of fun things, something for everybody. And they have a stage where we spoke to an audience of about maybe 30, 40 people. And we talked to them about kind of basic introduction to polyamory 101. But for me, the most fantastic part about that was after that, when we got into the Q&A and how it was really about community, and people were very comfortable in opening up and sharing where they were at, what questions they might have had. Yeah. So it was beautiful. And for me, it really spoke back to the origins of how we got started in this. So for those of you who might not know, when the pandemic came, it kind of made everybody go back into their own caves. And I said to Tara, well, it'd be nice if we were able to somehow reach out to these people and stay in contact with them. And you were willing and wonderful to do that. But you said, well, it's difficult because some people are on WhatsApp, some people are on Messenger, some people are on text, whatever it is. So you had the great idea, let's make this group where people can come together and have this thing. And voila, it, just by attraction, it got grassroots. It was announced and people said, well, let me invite my friend. And all of a sudden, here we are literally thousands of people later around the world. And it was just because we wanted to make this place where people could come together and be connected and have this community. And now it's really manifesting.
Yeah. And it was super nice to do this in person with a live audience and a stage. And so we had to try to figure out a way to make it super fun and engaging. And people were really amazing. So if you were watching, if you were there, thank you. I loved how everyone was just jumping in and participating. But what was cool about it is we talked about the different styles of non-monogamy and where you might start from being monogamous all the way to relationship anarchy. But what we found at the end, from some of the questions that came up, but then some conversations we had after, was this idea that people are in the process of transitioning. And I guess that's natural because, we had a similar experience when we first opened off as looking are possibly having threesomes. And then we went into going to clubs, swinging, and then parties, swinging. And now we follow a model that's a little more polyamorous. So I think this is a pretty common, I'm just showing up the diagram. These are the different things we talked about in general, the different basic areas of non-monogamy, but often people are starting in that monogamy where there's very high sexual exclusivity and very high emotional exclusivity. And then they start to dip things in and they might then swing, which is more, you're still with a primary partner or someone you consider your main partner that you're emotionally exclusive with, but you might have more sexual experiences. But then there's this jump where people are moving over to polyamory, which can be a much bigger change because now you're not having that emotional exclusivity that you might have had in swinging, but you're having emotional relationships with others as well as sexual relationships with others. And I think this is where it can get sticky for people because it's a big change.
Yeah. And it's often where we see the biggest displays of jealousy, right? Where we might be monogamous and then go into monogamish. And it's not to say that we would never experience jealousy there, but when we start to invite the emotional aspect, inviting deeper connections, sometimes people find that more threatening than the sexual overtures, right? So the sexual part, we can often say, well, it only happens when we do it at a club or at a swinging event, and it is physical, and we can kind of compartmentalize it a little bit easier. But when it's emotional, it seems to transcend, might be after those parties, after those things, and we start to catch it. And are we going to feel comfortable allowing for that demonstration?
I mean, when you're in a club or at a party, you're seeing your partner, so you know exactly what's happening, and it's kind of like Vegas rules, right? Like what happens at the club stays at the club, and then everything else happens outside of that is more monogamish, I guess you could say. So
yeah, and it's not that you're going to absolutely follow this way of doing it, right? That you go from being mono to start of swinging and then going into these other ways. But it seems to be a road that's well traveled for many people, right?
Yeah.
But it kind of, as we were looking at that and recognize it, it seems to kind of almost in a way parallel the relationship escalator, right? So in this vanilla monogamous world, very often it starts, well, you're dating somebody and you start to date them a little bit more often, and voila, you're going steady. And then all of a sudden, whether it's announced or just implied, we stop seeing other people, and then we might move in together, we might get engaged, we might get married, and then we die, and blah, blah, blah. Right? So it seems like not everybody goes that way, but often it seems to go that way. And it seems as though often in open relating, it might start with this exploration. Yeah, we can still have this monogamish model, and we'll do this, and then we can try dabbling in it. We'll go out on, like you said, like on a vacation, and when we're in Vegas, we'll do this, but then we come back and we go back to what we've known in the past, this other model. And then maybe we start saying, well, that worked, and it seemed like, okay, we were able to survive it. And now maybe we'll go to do other events where we'll see each other being participants, or we might even be able to go from soft swap, where we don't have intercourse, to full swap, where we do everything. And we might go from being in the same room to even being, well, I know you're on a different floor, but that's okay. Like, we're here together, to the point where eventually we even say, you know what, I'm going to go with my other partner, or I'm going to develop deeper relationships with these people. Maybe it's not something we start off with from that point, but it often seems as though we go towards that. And it feels a little bit, in some ways, almost parallel to the relationship escalator, even though we're trying to open up our relationship.
Well, I think it's more a de-escalator, because you're de-escalating in some ways from that monogamous, fully committed to one person model to something that's maybe a bit more open. I think I want to say too, it's not just for heterosexual couples too. This happens with same gender couples, bi
couples, whatever. Yeah.
It happens with all different people. And but I think what people were, the sentiment people were sharing with us was that this transition over to polyamory, like over the fence, that it changes, that emotional things changes. So we thought we would talk about, it makes it more real, and it can bring up feelings of insecurity or jealousy that you might not have had before. And it's really interesting to talk to people, because they were really struggling with unpacking what it was, because they're like, we've been doing this for like 5 years or whatever, and it's like, why is this so hard? And it doesn't seem to make sense. So it was quite interesting. So we came up with, as we do, how you can build the foundation to make this a more secure journey, and something a little less scary. So some basic steps that you can follow. Now, these are very basic. We're going to give you a very basic overview.
A broad overview.
Because I think there's a lot of subsets within that.
So it's not able to unpack everything, but this is just to give you some insight into basically how it would lay out.
Yeah. So the first thing, and this would be even if you were just opening up into becoming non-monogamous, is understanding your why. Your why is always the beginning, I think, for a lot of these things, right? Like, what makes you want to make a change to what you have now? And I know you don't like asking the question why. Is that what you were just going to say?
Yeah, I'm so predictable, and you see it on my face. Absolutely. Whenever possible, we try to avoid using the word why. Why do we not want to use why? Well, because very often when we might ask somebody, Tara, why did you want that car? Why did you do this? It might have an implication of being sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Accusatory?
Accusatory, exactly. So it's not necessarily that what we're doing is in any way needing to be justified, but how we might ask it might sound as though, like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? It might put us on the defensive, as opposed to asking open-ended questions. Well, what made you want to do this now?
Yeah.
Where were you thinking this is going? What happened? So we want to know that. But really, the why is trying to inform ourselves as to what is the a catalyst. What's prompting us to want or do this thing now? Yeah. So you and I have been going together for 5 years, and then suddenly we say, well, let's get married. That's fine. You might have the desire to get married, but what is it that is at play that's making us want to do this now? Or what was preventing us from doing it before? In other words, we want to know what are the elements that are involved here, so we can make an informed decision for ourselves and invite our partner to make a decision for themselves as well. So we want to gather that data so we know what's prompting us, as opposed to simply just being pulled by it. And if we were often saying no, is it fear-based? And what is with that? I digress. Go ahead.
But you did notice that in the notes I wrote, what makes you want to make this change? After I said, understanding your why. What you hope to gain and why now, and what do you sort of imagine? Because I think this will inform the other steps and the things that you might want to do in terms of, how you might bring it up to your partner,
right?
And just going there. So let's go to number two.
So we gain clarity by getting this data, right? And by knowing ourselves, what are the reasons for wanting or not wanting. When we become more familiar with it, more acquainted, more comfortable in knowing it ourselves, then it's easier for us to share it with somebody else. And in case they might say, well, things are going great. What makes you want to do this now? And it's a valid thing, right? It's a valid question. So we become informed and we're able to share it. And we can ask them for clarity as well.
Right. So that leads us into number two, which is
getting
clarity on what you want. So what is your personal relationship vision? And so I think when we work with couples, I know I do this when I work with couples, is before we start to talk about our collective vision, I think it's important to always do your own introspection about what your personal vision is of what you want. And it's really hard for some people to think this way sometimes because there's so many filters we put on what it is we want in life, like our dreams, everything. Like, can we do this? Is it possible? Will my partner agree? And that sort of thing. So trying as best as you can to creating that relationship vision for yourself based on what makes you want to make a change.
When you talk about that relationship vision, it's amazing because the only time I'd ever heard about a relationship vision before was in monogamy, where maybe a woman that I was dating might say, well, I have a vision of getting married, right? And that was the thing. And that for me was the thing to be avoided at all costs. But then it made me think later on, somebody once asked me, well, what was your business plan? Because I had a renovation company with my brother. And it occurred to me, well, we never had a business plan. We were just going at it. It was just unfolding organically. We'd find contracts, we'd do them, and so on. And that seemed to parallel how my relationships were going, right? I might meet somebody and we kind of just hang out. And I never really thought about where it was going to go other than avoiding marriage. Now I might be able to say, well, you know what? I've been around the block a couple of times and I know that there's certain things that I like and certain things I like less. And so I can now envision the type of relationship I want. I want one that has elements of this and that. Like I might want to have some kitchen table time. I might want to have a nesting partner who I also have relationships with my metamor, all kinds of different things that I might not have known or had the vernacular for before. But now we are starting to develop this language. We were starting to get better clarity on what elements are on the table and what ones we're wanting and not wanting. So we're going to find ways of getting that.
I think if you have a vision too, you're more likely to manifest it, because by actually writing it down or being intentional about what your vision is, you actually put it out there in the universe. The universe. Did I say universe?
All right.
Universe.
I like
what it is you want, and then if you start to picture yourself in those things, then you start taking actions that are associated with that vision. Yeah. Same thing with finding ideal partners. I do part of the work I do, and we do in our group program, and what I do with people individually is developing a relationship vision and a vision of your ideal partner, so that you can actually see yourself in it, see it with yourself with those people, and then make it happen.
Yeah. And, I'm all for being spontaneous and being organic, but having this relationship vision also then helps to empower me into deciding where I want to go with it, right? So it gives me a sense of, greater autonomy, I guess, or having more of a say rather than just being adrift in it and letting it happen. Because then maybe I get what I want, but maybe I don't. This gives me a greater chance to really create and then invite the kind of relationship that I might be wanting.
Exactly.
It's good to know.
I think it's magical.
I think so too.
All right.
Does it also help us then to know the relationship vision we want or what we don't want? Should we also know the negative, the things that we're wanting to steer clear from? Is that also a benefit?
I think it's good to know those things, but I really feel strongly about focusing on the things that you want rather than the things that you don't want.
Okay, so you want to manifest and visualize the things that you're wanting.
Yes.
Got you.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay.
Okay, so we talked about what makes you want to do this. So your why, creating your own personal relationship vision, and then if you're preparing for and having conversations.
Right. So in the first parts, we're looking introspectively. We're gathering the data from ourselves. We're trying to figure out what it is we're wanting and not wanting. We're able to look at the who, what, where, when, all those things of it. And once we've gathered that data, now it's time for sharing it, right? So we're going to announce our position, but we're also hopefully wanting to find out from our partner or partners what it is that they're wanting, where we can see that there's overlap. And if I'm saying that I want something, I want vanilla on Tuesday, are you wanting that? And if you're not, might we explore what you imagine it's going to look like to have vanilla on Tuesday? What might be your reasons for wanting it or not wanting it? So it's all about the communication exploration. So now we get to the part where we're sharing it, right? So we're preparing for and having those conversations.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people are afraid to have those conversations because they're worried about what their partner is going to say or how they're going to react. Or
well, does that fall into future forecasting? Do I imagine I transfer my own fears onto you and think, oh, she'll never go for that because this, that, and the other thing, and I've already decided for you. I've already answered the question for you before even opening my mouth.
Exactly. Yeah, I worked with someone who was wanting to explore bisexuality, and it was something they identified with prior to being in their marriage. And then we were talking about this. They really wanted to do it. They were so afraid to share that with their partner. And then they found out when they did that the person was like, well, I feel the same. And I'm also feeling like I'm bisexual. So it opened up a whole new dialogue of conversation between them.
But before that, they imagined that the other person was going to poo-poo it and say, no, that's not what I want, right?
Exactly.
So they had already made the decision for the other person without ever inviting them to express their own thoughts.
Yeah. So, I think sometimes we worry that if it's going to be accepted or, the other thing we had talked about before was about managing your expectations.
Sure.
Because you may be ready and gung-ho and you may have been thinking about it for a while. This is the thing. Sometimes we have our own internal dialogue and we're preparing ourselves mentally for something. And then our partner may not be as ready to jump in as quickly. So it's something to prepare ourselves for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it makes me think we might have been building up this argument in our mind for some time. It might have been something we're wanting. And then when we finally feel as though we're ready to announce it, we might imagine that, well, now I'm ready for it. The world should be ready for it. Whereas maybe we don't know that, right? So it starts again by collecting the data and then starting to share it. But we do so with manage expectations, right? So this is what I'm wanting, and now we'll see how it's going to land. They may be on board with it. They may be hesitant. They may be totally rejecting of it. We don't know yet. And we might even ask them or we might find out in talking about it, is it something they're wanting? Are they reluctant to do it? Is it a hard no? Is it a soft no? Is there possible ways of exploring it and addressing what the resistance or defense might be?
Yeah.
But we'll only know by opening up that conversation.
Right. And having those conversations helps build trust and allows you each to consent to a change in your relationship. And in terms of timing, sometimes, we always talk about having a relationship review as part, a regular relationship review or business meeting, as you call it. So if you are having those regularly, and we highly recommend this, it's something we teach our clients to do, that might be an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations. Do we want to change the way we relate to each other? Is there an opportunity to do something different or try something different?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we might theoretically have the idea, oh yeah, we should talk to our partners and, we'll just go at it. And yet it might be sometimes difficult to make that overture. And one of the considerations might be, well, if I were to say that I want something else or something different, are they going to receive that possibly as a rejection, that I'm not satisfied with what they're offering, which may not be the case at all. But bringing it up might be rather difficult. So to actually have planned meetings, as weird and foreign as it might seem, as strange and contrived as it might be, it might also afford you that opportunity to bring up things. It's already tabled that we're going to have this time set, and we're going to look at not only what's not working well, but we might also celebrate all the good things that are working. I love the way we come together and we are participants and we continue to communicate openly. I love that we appreciate the other person's position and we consult each other and that we have respect and consent, all these things. But it's already the invitation to go to these things, as opposed to somehow, sometimes it's more difficult to make these overtures and start that dialogue.
And I think it creates a safe space too. If your partner, if say you're bringing it up, if your partner is not comfortable, it's an opportunity to start to have those dialogues in that environment that's safe, that's part of your review. So they're not, I don't know. I just think, I feel like it would make it be more comfortable environment because you're planning you're setting an agenda for those, you're doing them regularly, that sort of thing. Right.
And what are the 3 T's that you use as far as when we or how we should? Timing, turf, and
tone.
Timing, turf, and tone.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's for when we're having difficult conversation. They're going to have any conversation.
But even our business meeting, right? Yeah. We don't know that it's going to be difficult. It might just be reviewing how things are going, and maybe it's a perfectly easy conversation to have. But we might still be mindful of those 3 T's.
Okay. Yeah, you might not want to bring up when you're, in the middle of having sex, and that with your partner that, oh, by the way, I really want to open up our relationship so I can start dating people myself.
Yeah, because the timing and the turf there, I might then receive that. It's like, I was just doing this thing, and then they thought about opening up. Does that mean that I'm not doing that well, or I'm, not satisfying you in that way? And maybe it has nothing to do with that, right? So yeah, be mindful of where we're going to talk about it, how we're going to talk about it, and when we're going to talk about it.
It's funny. I mean, I joke, but I think sometimes when we're having sex and we're being intimate, we do feel close to our partner. We feel like those are really good times to bring up these sorts of things, but they can be misconstrued. I guess is just what we were trying to say.
It makes me think back to when we were on occasion. I was going to say in the beginning, but no, it hasn't. It's not only just the beginning, but we might be in the act of doing something. And you might say to me, a little bit more to the right, or a little bit over to the left, or a little bit less pressure, or a little bit more pressure, or whatever it is. And I could initially, or I could still take that as, oh, I'm not doing a good enough job. Or I might also look at it as like, wow, she feels comfortable in letting it be known what her desires are, what her preferences are. And then it might make it that much more enjoyable. So why not be open to hearing about that?
Exactly. Okay, so we talked about having the essential conversations, and then making a plan to get there.
Yeah.
So creating a vision together. So so that's the key part, is together. Like, this is the, where the rubber hits the road, the what, where, when, how, who. And I think it's an important, even if one person wants the change, that you create if it's a partnership where you're moving from something like swinging, where there's a definite partnership and it's closer to, emotional exclusivity, that you create a vision together about what you want. And then a plan, as we call it, our relationship blueprint on how to get from A to B in the most secure way as possible. Yeah. So in some cases, this may have to be staged out.
What do you mean by staged out? What's that mean?
Well, if you want to go from, there goes my earring.
Awesome.
If you want to go from, say, having the occasional threesome or swinging, like going to a swingers club or lifestyle club or party once every 2 months, and you want to start dating, if you're, your end goal is that I want to be going on dates or have a regular relationship with somebody where I might see them, like, say you're married, outside my marriage, like once a week, then that's a big change. So how do we get to that place? Like, how do we stage that out? Maybe you don't do it once a week to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, what would feel the most comfortable? What timelines can you agree to? And I think sometimes what people fall into is like, the one person might be having some jealous feelings about this because it's a change. Like, if it's not something you anticipated, or you were super happy with the way things were, it's like, people get caught in this dynamic is like, well, when I'm ready, I'll let you know. But I think you need to be a bit more active about it. It's like, okay, well, let's try this, and then let's try this. What if we did, what if you went on dates every 2 weeks, or like how, and negotiating those sorts of things. Like, what would be the most comfortable way to do it? And how can we support ourselves along the way? So that's the other key point in making a blueprint to get there.
As you're saying that, it occurs to me about these shifts that we might want, these changes, this staging that we're going to do, how our partner might on occasion seem resistant towards it or defending against it. And part of it seems very often is because it involves change. And for many people, the scariest part of change is the unknown, right? What's going to happen if I get there? What happens if I don't like this, or if I feel this way or that way or the other thing? So what we want to do is we want to talk about it beforehand and imagine scenarios. So how do you imagine you would feel if this were to happen? What do you think it would be like if that were to, how would we be? Who would we be? All those questions. And we can talk about it to try and shed some light on the unknown variables, the part that might make changing it scariest, right? Because we think we're going to change, and what's it going to leave me? How is it going to leave us? Where is that going to happen? What's going to happen if? So we talk about it, and then we might say, well, if there were to happen and you felt this way, what if we were to do this? What if we do that? And we talk about all these things that makes us feel a little bit more secure. We say, well, okay, if I start to feel this way and I'm not feeling it, can we backpedal and can we come back to this? And then hopefully we have a partner who says, well, yes, we would be checking in and we would see. And if it's not feeling right, then yes, we'll come back and we'll talk about it and we'll explore it, and we'll either shelf it or we'll find another approach, or we'll see that it's survivable and it's something we want, all of that. So being able to demystify the hidden aspects of change is often the way that we're able to directly address the fears that are associated with it, things that might prevent us from looking to different ways.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So figuring out what it is you're worried about, like what you're worried about and what might counteract that worry, or what you may anticipate and how you can offset that. So for example, if you've been doing non-monogamy for a while, you may have some sort of relationship agreement, things that you agree to in terms of how you relate with others. And so that might need some updating. So how can we update those agreements to feel more secure and be a safe haven and a secure base, which is all about secure attachment, which we've talked about before. Actually, that's this week's module for our program.
Yeah, it's a great thing, because having greater safe haven, safe attachment will help us to know that we can explore things outside what's already known to us.
So, I mean, one of the things that often helps is the idea around quality time. So how might you create quality time together? How might you have consideration? I think that's the thing, is when we move from a place where we're always doing stuff together to then somebody dating somebody else, sometimes it feels like a zero-sum game, right? Like, because time is infinite, right? I mean, love isn't infinite, but time is. So then how do we, like, is that person taking time away from me? And how do I feel about that? You know, maybe they might be taking time away, but are there ways that we can ensure that we have quality time or make plans in advance to feel great about those connections? So it's actually a positive thing, like, oh, you know, we're going to go on this awesome date, or I have this to look forward to, whatever, that sort of thing.
Right. So if I understand you correctly, it's not just we're doing this thing together, we're often doing something together, and then you go away and do something with somebody else, and I'm just left with a void. So there are provisions that I can put in place to make me feel as though it's something that I look forward to as well, that there's benefits to participating in this, as opposed to just saying, I'm just full of a lot of fear as to what am I going to have if you are gone. All I'll have is this hole in the donut.
Yes, exactly. Or that you might have some extra considerations that you now have to take care of, like, you know, your partner's on a date, so now you have to take care of the kids or something like that. So there's like practical things, and then there's like the emotional things. So coming up with a plan on how you're going to deal with those things, and updating your agreements so that it's as smooth a transition from A to B as possible. Yeah, so that was number 4. And then number 5, which we talked about before, is review and adjust as necessary. So we talked about having regular reviews in your relationship, but if you are making a transition, it's probably a good time to be more regular about those reviews.
You know, also the idea of the regular reviews, it really is a good time to air any grievances, right? Because resentments can be like a cancer in a relationship. So if I'm feeling that I'm not quite getting the attention that I want, or if I've overextended or whatever it is, and I'm simply internalizing it, it can lead to resentment, and then it might find ways of allowing for its own expression in ways that are not productive, in ways that are in fact toxic. But if we have regular opportunity, an invitation to a platform where we can announce our position, then we can address those resentments, possible resentments, and find better, more harmonious ways to be with each other. So it might be difficult to initially say, hey, you know what, I'm not liking this, I'm not wanting this. But if I know that there's a time that's going to be open for that window, we go at it. It's almost like we were saying about, you know, we have a friend of ours who are, they've decided after some time now to move in together, and it's on a trial basis. So I was suggesting to them, how will we know at the end of it whether or not it's working? I said, well, should we already agree that it's going to be for 1 month and that we're going to move out regardless of whether it's working out well? And then from there, we could, make it easier to make the announcement, yes, I want to continue this, or no. And if they find it problematic, maybe they could have a secret ballot to do so. The two of them would have a secret ballot.
The secret ballot was the most hilarious part of that conversation. I mean, it was interesting, their response though, was because not to that part, but they felt that they would just know. But I think you were trying to offer that there might be a way of making it easier in case someone feels uncomfortable with that sharing. Is actually having something that says, okay, we're doing this, and in a month, we'll stop doing it, and then we'll decide what we're going to do. You know what I mean?
But it made me think back, because another couple we were speaking to, we're talking about when they have issue, they often will write something down and then put it in a jar, and then the other person will take it out and read it, and they'll be able to go back and forth that way, right? But the point is, they do make that gesture at communication to be able to announce that things are working well or not working well, or what needs tweaking.
One of the questions that came up is, if you are going through this transition and one of you is having a hard time, how do you bring that up with your partner? And we talked about our attunement communication process, which we do in our program. But, it's what we were trying to share was, you don't just share how you're feeling. The whole nonviolent communication model of sharing observations, thoughts and feelings, your needs and request. Sometimes people forget what you need and request part, and they just share, this is not working for me, I feel shitty, whatever. But if you also share what it is you need in that moment, or any requests of your partner, it would be helpful. Then it can be a more productive, progressive conversation in order to resolve these sort of bumps in making a transition to something that's different than what you're currently doing.
Yeah. As we say this, it becomes more and more clear, and it's restating the obvious, restating what we've always said. And that is, by getting in tune with our own thoughts and feelings, and then being able to share it, we are expanding our ability to communicate. And it's all about communication. It's so funny looking back in my fantasies about being open swinger, polyamorous. I was going to have so much sex. And it's not to say that I'm not, or that I didn't, but I never knew how much communication I was going to have or would be well served in having. It's all about the communication.
I actually had a really great t-shirt idea. And if I design it, I'm going to let you know, because it has to do with being polyamorous and communication.
Oh,
I don't think I've seen this on a t-shirt before. So everything's falling today.
Isn't that wonderful how when we start getting into this, how it becomes more and more enticing, we actually enjoy it. So in the beginning, I remember speaking to somebody, and they're like, oh yeah, relationships are a lot of work. Like, for them to be successful, you have to be willing to communicate. And I thought, oh my God, that sounds terrible. Like, I don't have to do work in communication. And yet I find firsthand that when I do it, first of all, it's a lot easier to invite and to listen, but also the benefits towards it, right? I go into relationships feeling more secure, and I know my partners are more secure as well.
All right. Yeah, I like the communication. I feel like it makes us actually closer.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one thing about being polyamorous, is you definitely have to learn how to communicate if you're going to survive it, and thrive in it, survive and thrive.
Well, it makes me think also about how in the very beginning, when I would want to go on a date or speak to other people, how I would want to bring up the issue of STI testing, right? For myself and for our community, that it was important. But I felt kind of awkward in doing it in the beginning, as though, are they going to think that I have, all these different diseases, and that they're not going to want to date me or whatever? And then I suspended that thought and thought, well, no, this is important to me. I need to announce it, and it's important to our agreement as well. So I'm going to do it. And now I mention in a very matter-of-fact kind of way, and it's received in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. We talk about it, and it's so much easier. But in the beginning, it was not familiar to me and was difficult. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we offer these different invitations to communication, and they may not be part of our language, part of our nature just yet, but the more we participate in them, the easier it will get, and the less opportunity for miscommunication will we have. Yeah. Which is not an eloquent way of saying it, but I think you know what I mean.
Well, I think when you position it as, having good sexual health is something I value in my relationships. When you position it in that way, it's really hard to deny that it's like taking care of yourself is a bad thing. I don't know. So All right, so we talked about the basic steps in order to transition from one form of monogamy to non-monogamy to another. So they were understanding your why, or what makes you want to make the change, getting clarity on what you want, your personal vision, preparing for and having the conversations, making a plan to get there together, and then reviewing and adjusting as necessary. Easy peasy, right?
Sure is.
Well, it sounds easy, but it actually isn't, as we, witnessed this weekend. It's not always as easy as that. Even when I think you tell yourself, you can intellectualize that it should be easy, but it's not always. And sometimes you need support in doing that transition. So if that's you, we've definitely worked with people who want to make this transition and are wondering exactly how to do it or afraid to make the leap. You can reach out to us. We can book a relationship rescue call. It's a complimentary call. And basically on this call, we talk about where it is you want to go and what any reservations you might have or resistances, and then get you on a plan to get there.
Perfect.
So that's today. Thanks everyone for watching. And if you have any questions, please shoot us a DM. And yeah, I'd love to talk to you.
Thank you.
If you want to explore polyamory, open up a relationship, or try your hand at swinging, we can help. Check out our website at taranandre.com for information on our Poly Newbies digital course or our deeper dive open relationship and polyamory mastery program, where you get direct coaching from us. There's also other individual and couples coaching options there as well. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic